Life after Keytruda. What's my life looking like now after Keytruda? Well, I think a hallmark of chemotherapy and then straight away after that, Keytruda. It's been 2.5 years on interventional drugs. I think that has a huge toll on anybody, and a hallmark is weakness. So when you finish Keytruda, in my own experience, and I think it's similar to other people, you still remain quite weak. That is one of the key things, and you have to deal with it. You have to sort of like accept it, and then just, and in my case, just to break it down to small little goals. But it does take a long time. It's only now in recent times, like I'm 1 year to go on the trial, so I've been going on it 4 years now, and I'm only just recovering that deep innate strength or battery that you have within you. It feels like I've got an external battery, this the get fit one, and then you've got this innate one in the center. And that one is recharged, and the feeling I get is that I'm able to cope with normal exercise and not be completely wiped out after it. So I'm quite excited. I'm not going to return to my 6 day a week regime of cycling. 400 to 600k a week and then running off the bike. That seems quite mad now. But I am looking forward to riding 3 or 4 days a week and maybe doing a couple of 100k's and enjoying it with my mates. So life after Keytruda in that respect is looking good. I'm able to I've mentally and physically come into sync. I know that when I first tried to get back into the work environment, I was just a mess. I had no confidence. My mind and my body mouth didn't seem to work in sync. So that's all starting to come back. And I have an extrovert type personality, and that can become a problem if you're trying to get involved and you just can't. You just fall apart pretty quickly. So gradually, all I can say is it's improved over time. What advice would I pass on to other cancer sufferers, people that are trying to overcome cancer? There's two parts. One is the me bit, and the other part is the medical bit. I think the first thing that I would highlight is acceptance. It's an incredibly hard word to get over, but you have to accept your diagnosis. It's not giving up, but in my case, I looked at it this way. It was how I reset my brain, and that allowed the willingness to rise up and try and start to achieve what doesn't look like can be achieved. Willingness can do that. It's a walk on water magic that you have within. So willingness comes from acceptance. The third thing is that I learnt to write. I don't know why I did this, but I learnt to write out everything out of my head. It was overwhelmed. There was too much clutter in there. So I just decided that I needed to write it out of my head, as I put it. I wrote notes on everything that I had sitting in there that was clogged up there, not just about the cancer, about my whole life really. I created something called Chapters of Me, and I just started dumping the information into the closest chapter I thought was appropriate. That purged me. It uncluttered my brain because I needed a clear mind to take on this challenge. So that was a significant thing. I think the other thing that I learnt along the way, the hard way, was people look at you with pity, or people get sick of people being sick, and that becomes a pressure in itself, both sides. But people have their own realities. So I got to a point in several conversations where people were obviously wanting me just to be realistic, understand that I was going to die, and there wasn't really no choice, and I needed to get my affairs in order. Well, I remember thinking at the time in one particular conversation that, well, whose reality are we talking about, yours or mine? Now, at that point, I realised that their reality was theirs and mine was mine. This is my life, my reality, my story. So the more I created my own story and the reality around it, the less I was impacted by other people's reality getting in. If you do nothing about that, other people's reality just takes over. And it's a little bit like pointed the bone, I guess. You just start to wither away on that basis only. So that was, for what it's worth, that's what I learned. And I started creating my own reality, my own Alice in Wonderland reality, really. Medical, the IHC test, immunohistochemical test. Something I didn't know at the beginning. It was done. It saved my life. That is a test a simple test, 3 to 5 day turnaround that they can do immediately after a surgery or on a biopsy, or obtaining a biopsy. It tells the oncologists, or the people taking the test, the lab, whether you have biomarkers that can align with immunotherapy treatments or trials. Now, in my case, there was no cure for this cancer. The only chance was a trial. Now, that'll be the same for a lot of serious cancers. So you need to know this. So you need to ask your oncologist or surgeon, whoever controls that, have you done an IHC test? And have you and asked them to highlight the biomarkers such as PD-L1 and MSI-High that align with current immunotherapy treatments and trials. That is a lifesaver. So that is a big one. Follow that up by a genomic testing or a molecular profiling. Now, not everybody can afford them. They're quite expensive. Some insurances cover them, but you need to aim at that as your second option. And that takes a lot longer, 6 to 8 weeks potentially, but it needs to be done. What that does is it allows the oncologist to see what's going on. The lab that does it will shine a light on what is driving the mutations and what needs to be done to overcome them. It will also highlight what trials and treatments are out there currently that will be highly targeted to deal with these. If you don't get this done, you rely on traditional treatments, and that's like flying in the dark, especially now that there are a lot more modern tools and treatment terms to overcome cancers. Follow that up by saying keep an open mind, be willing to share and willing to listen to other people, and get involved in Facebook groups that are specific to your exact cancer as a fast way of learning the landscape. It's a fast way of learning who's who in the zoo out there, and cutting out all that mountain of unnecessary information that's flooding your brain. I spent 2.5 years being treated in a breast cancer ward for my trials. So I met a lot of women who had breast cancer, and they all handled the same thing differently. That taught me a lot. So what stands out is the people, the chart that life, the opportunity is life, and life is the opportunity. Really basic, simple things. I wanted to live life, and many do that have passed away. That's difficult. That is really hard, but you have to make the most of it. And in my case, making the most of it is to share what I know, and give other people a chance to know what I know. It might be relevant to them. That's a big part of what I've learned. Saying thank yous. I'll start off first though by saying that I'm a believer in you create your own luck, and that's at least how I see it looking back over my time. That my personality was open enough to leave that bright beacon burning so that luck and opportunity could find me. When I first got sick, Dr. Kathy Hughes was swift. So I thank Kathy for being so good at getting me in front of the right people. When I was operated on and my post-surgery consultation, Dr. Kwong threw me a bone. He had nothing really for me, but he threw me a bone of a clinical trial with Dr. Matthew Burge. It was that meeting of Dr. Matthew Burge that saved my life. That trial failed miserably. And as I mentioned earlier on, but it put me in the hands of Dr. Matthew Burge, who was head of the clinical trial Keynote 158 out of Brisbane. That saved my life. Keytruda, Merck, who provide that drug, saved my life. Just going backwards a little bit, I had an aneurysm a month after my Whipple operation, and had Dr. Tom Snow not been on the grounds that night, I think he may have been leaving, I wouldn't be alive. It came down to seconds, and his skill kept me in the game. Without that, I wouldn't have gone on to the trials, and I wouldn't have been successful. But last and not least, in a sense, is a big thank you to my brother, Graham, who's 2 years younger than me. He also was diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma prior to me, 2 years prior. 4 years prior, and then died 2 years prior to my diagnosis. I learnt from Graham because Graham rose up to fight it head on, and really deal to this cancer. The bottom line was he became punch drunk and gave up. I looked at it and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get alongside this beast, and I'm going to find a way to walk alongside and negotiate the best outcome. So I took a different angle, a different way of looking at the whole thing. So thank you, Graham. As much as I can, I'm probably alive because of that. So, and at last but not least is my family. I mean, what my wife Claire has had to go through is horrendous, but she didn't skip a beat. So, over and out.